Defence Secretary John Healey is ready to speak to GB News, listeners and viewers. Defence Secretary, thank you so much for your time on what is, I know, for you an extremely busy morning. I think our audience is a little confused by the PM's statement yesterday. Do we support the US and Israel in this military action in Iran or not?
We, the British, were no part of the strikes yesterday and overnight. We share the primary aim that the US have and allies in the region have, that Iran should never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and our UK actions, with stepping up our UK defences in recent weeks, flying the skies yesterday, as we will do again today, as part of a coordinated regional defensive action, is all about defending our UK personnel, our bases and our regional allies, and we're doing that alongside those allies, including with the US.
Respectfully, Defence Secretary, that hasn't answered my question. Do we support the US in Israel in this military action? You haven't actually answered that direct question.
Well, I've said to you, we were no part of the strikes.
I know we weren't, but do we support
concentrating all
them?
our efforts. We're concentrating all our efforts on the defensive actions that the UK can uniquely contribute, not just to, and my job, to protect British citizens, military and civilian, that are in the region, but also to protect our allies and our bases there, and that's what we're doing. We're doing that in a coordination with allies. It's why we've got planes in the air now. It's why we've got more weapon systems in the region, more radars in the region, because I deployed those several weeks ago in anticipating the potential for this sort of tension. But as the Prime Minister said yesterday, Iran can end this. Iran can end this. It can stop its increasingly indiscriminate attacks widely across the Middle East. It can end its weapons programs and return to the sort of negotiations that long-term will secure the stability in the region.
Okay, so you're comfortable when we have now the overthrow of this so-called tyrant of Tehran, a man who spent decades with the IRGC carrying out the most horrendous human rights abuses against the Iranian people, killing people, murdering people in their hospital beds. The US and Israel have taken action against this murderous medievalism, and you're comfortable that the UK and a Prime Minister and an Attorney General that like to speak about the importance of human rights have basically taken a back seat on this?
On the contrary, we were putting extra defences into the region several weeks ago. We've been leading the way with UK planes in the air that have been protecting other regional allies, and I, for one, do not mourn the end of the Ayatollah. He led a regime that is a source of evil, murdering its own citizens, sponsoring and exporting terror, including to Britain over the years, and now is responsible for an escalating level of risk because of its widespread, increasingly uncontrolled and less indiscriminate attacks on allies in the region that put UK people at risk as well.
Okay then, so Defence Secretary, why won't you support wholeheartedly the military action that's been used to overthrow the Ayatollah? Is it because Lord Hermer has expressed concerns about international law?
No, it's because our first focus and our primary focus, our full focus, is on the defensive action that we can contribute, not just to protecting our own people in the region, but to the wider regional stability and the prevention of further escalation. Those are my three top priorities as Defence Secretary. And that sits alongside the determination that the Prime Minister is showing over the weekend, speaking to E3 leaders, leaders in the wider Middle East, as well as to President Trump.
Sorry. Okay, we must nail this down. Has the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, advised the Prime Minister that this military action against Iran could breach international law? Yes or no?
I'm not going to talk about the internal discussions in government,
Why
nor am I
not?
going to talk about the discussions that we have with our close...
It's absolutely central, this question, for the GB News audience. Has Lord Hermer suggested that the Prime Minister, and as a consequence Great Britain, shouldn't support this military action because he considers it to be illegal?
I'm just not going to talk about the internal government discussions, nor am I going to talk about the discussions we have with close allies, including the US. Judge us by our actions. We were not part of the strikes against Iran, but we're leading the way with defensive action. Our full focus is in contributing to that.
If you're leading the way with defensive action, if you're leading the way with defensive action,
reinforcing regional stability for the long term.
Okay, if we're leading the way with defensive action, why did we block the US from using Diego Garcia?
I've just said to you, I'm simply not going to talk about, and you would not expect me to talk about, the discussions we have either in the government or with our close allies, including the US. What we have done is strengthen British defences in the region. We stepped up with UK planes in the air as part of a coordinated regional defensive operation to protect our own people and our bases, to protect our allies in the region, and that is a special contribution and action that the UK is making.
Are we going to step up even further? We now have the newly installed leader, the replacement for the Ayatollah, President Pezeshkian, saying that revenge is, quote, our legitimate right and duty. So, of course, Brits are worried about retaliation, not just by Iran, but by its proxies. Therefore, if needed to, John Healey, will we step up? Will we provide more military help to the US and Israel?
We will do what we need to do to help prevent further regional escalation, and we will always do what is needed to protect British personnel, protect our bases in the region. That's my first priority, my first duty as Defence Secretary, and I know the Prime Minister shares that.
Why is the Ayatollah's office in London still open? Why has Iran's ambassador to the UK not been expelled? And why is the IRGC still not prescribed, John Healey?
Well, those are all questions that really are not directly for me as Defence Secretary. My first focus is on our UK personnel. It's also on UK civilians, and I know how worried people will be as they see some of these indiscriminate Iranian strikes, not just on military targets, but on hotels in Dubai and Bahrain, and on Kuwait's civilian airport. Just to give you an example of how serious the risk is, just yesterday on that Bahraini military base, we had 300 UK personnel, some of whom were within a few hundred yards of the missile strikes on that base. This is why, as Defence Secretary, my first focus is on the defensive action that we take, abiding by international law at all times, but making sure that we do what we can to keep British personnel safe, secure our bases, and support the regional stability and the protection of regional allies. That's what we're being asked to do, that's what we're stepping up to do.
How many Brits have made contact in the last 12 to 24 hours for some kind of consular or other assistance? We on GB News have been speaking to people in Dubai, speaking to people in Oman, in Bahrain, indeed in Qatar, hiding under desks. How many people have come forward, and what help is the UK government giving them?
Yes, look, that's a good question that I can't answer directly. My first focus as Defence Secretary has been the 25 waves of Iranian strikes that we saw yesterday, involving at least 200 missiles and over 200 drones. But the advice that we're giving to people is check the Foreign Office website at all times. It's fast moving and fast changing. If you're in countries like Palestine or Israel, just don't go there. Most of the countries in the wider Middle East have advice that says register your presence, and some of the countries are advising at the moment to stay at home or take shelter. So my best advice to people is go to the Foreign Office website, follow the travel advice, and that's where you can also register your presence if you are in the Middle East.
Do you envisage a situation where the UK might be offering asylum to refugees leaving Iran?
This is jumping well ahead here. It's not a matter that has been part of that is simply not a matter that has been part of our discussions in government at this point. Our principal focus has been to get Iran to end this, to step back from its increasingly indiscriminate attacks, and my priority as Defence Secretary has been defending the UK bases, the UK personnel that are out there, the safety of our wider civilian citizens in the Middle East, but also doing what we can to protect our allies and our partners in the area as well.
Final question, Defence Secretary. Do you think Rachel Reeves is going to have to change the spring statement in light of recent events? We know that you as Defence Secretary are asking the Chancellor for more money for our defences. This could have a huge impact on oil and gas prices, on the price of petrol and diesel for British people. Are you going to be urging the Chancellor to have another look at the figures?
Look, I know the Chancellor is watching the impact on oil prices, on petrol prices. We know that the price of war is always much greater than the cost of being able to deter it in the first place. We saw that when Russia invaded Ukraine 4 years ago and inflation went into double digits. Look, on funding for defence, the Chancellor has already given defence an extra £5 billion in this year. We've got £270 billion in this Parliament. We're increasing defence by a greater amount than at any time since the end of the Cold War. And we're doing that because we're responding to the rising defence demands on defence, and we're doing that to respond to the increasing threats that we face as a country.
John Healey, the Defence Secretary, thank you very much indeed for joining me on GB News this morning.